Nigeria is open for business, according to President Tinubu, who was speaking during his state visit to France. And to be fair, Paris is a good place to express that kind of positivity, given that Nigeria has become France's top trading partner in sub-Saharan Africa. And amid their warm bantering in pidgin English and dancing to Afrobeats music, the two leaders, Bola Tinubu and Emmanuel Macron, say they are taking the relationship even further, aiming to deepen economic and diplomatic ties. Nigeria, of course, faces a raft of economic challenges, with more than half its population living below the poverty line. So this visit to France represents an opportunity for President Tinubu to attempt to tap economic investment. And for its part, France is trying to bolster its relationships in Africa amid setbacks with its former colonies and increasing geopolitical competition from China and Russia. So a match made in heaven between Nigeria and France, or just another photo opportunity? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line by Nigeria's former permanent representative at the UN in Geneva, Ambassador Humphrey Orjiakor. Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's start from the perspective of France. I mean, they've really laid out, if you like, the very best for President Tinubu on this visit, and you could argue that with military coups in French West Africa and those countries pivoting away from France, its influence in Africa is waning. So this trip by President Tinubu from a leading English-speaking African nation is important for France, isn't it?
Thank you so much for bringing me to this program today. You know, we are watching this event in France, this visit at the highest political level, Nigeria and France. And we are hoping, because excellent protocol arrangements, the red carpet, the clear glass have a way of making participants forget the main substance of a state visit at this level and begin to concentrate on those other nice vistas, visions, reception at the Elysee Palace. I hope that is not the case here. Yes, this visit is, I think, of very strategic importance for France in particular, because this is a country that has had almost 400 years of experience in Africa, and probably up to 150 years of colonial, just post-colonial experience in Africa. France or French influence on the African continent has been quite prominent in the last century and now. Apparently, that is beginning to sour because, first of all, that generation of Africans who were so enamored by the excellence of Paris, the beauty, the razzmatazz, they seem to be leaving the scene, either by natural extinction or whatever other means. And the younger Francophonie Africans, those younger people who grew up under French influence, are taking over in Francophone Africa. And they do not think that the relationship between France and the East African colonies have always been particularly beneficial to Africa, to their countries. And I think that's probably the reason for the apparent difficulties that France is having with Francophone Africa today. And the pivot towards Anglophone Africa is something we have to watch closely, knowing that in Africa's relations, particularly West Africa, where most of the French colonies exist in Africa, has not always been very smooth. The relationship trying to create a common economic community, a common monetary community in West Africa has not gone very smoothly.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Well, I mean, you made a very interesting point there when you sort of analyzed what is happening in Francophone Africa. But Nigeria, of course, is not at all like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, or even Chad. So in assessing what France is looking for from Nigeria, I suppose they have to keep in mind that this country is not a pushover, and French influence will always be limited here, won't it? I mean, it's got to be some sort of relatively equal partnership.
You know, the thing about equal partnership is something I think every person in the profession of diplomacy and international relations should take very cautiously. Equal partnership between a nuclear power, a member of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations, a leading member of the European Union, and a country which is struggling from stability, insecurity issues at home, a country which, according to the description you had a few moments ago, over 50% of the population are living below the UN prescribed $2 or so a day. The poverty level in Nigeria, the structure and content of Nigeria's economy vis-a-vis that of France should be something people should be careful about when they talk of equal partnership. Even between the powers themselves, talk of equal partnership is always nuanced. Between a thoroughly developing country like Nigeria and France, we had better be careful because France is in it for itself. France is trying to rebuild its influence in Africa. Probably is hoping that Nigeria should be the entry, should be the force by which it regains its influence and power and economic relevance in the continent.
Right.
As you said, it has so many challenges.
Right.
Challenges to that effect, yes.
Nevertheless, it must count for something, mustn't it? That, you know, like when we look at the trade figures, for example, France's largest trading partner in Africa in 2023 was Nigeria, followed by South Africa. So that must count for something.
Indeed it does. Indeed it does. Nobody can deny that. But there is always something we must never forget. What is the nature? What is the structure? What are the contents of the trade relationships between Nigeria and France, for instance? Take a look at it. Has it actually altered or departed from the colonial pattern that was set since the 1800s, since the 19th century? I do not think so, because it's still the same arrangements under the Lomé process that started in the 1970s, by which, of course, a country like Nigeria will produce the raw produce, agricultural produce for processing, mineral produce for processing. Maybe it will go to France, they'll be turned into industrial goods and sent back to Nigeria. Yes, the figures are good, they sound good, but the content and structure of the trade is important, very important. In fact, this is why many of us are advocating that for anything like equal partnership, to exist between the European powers, or even the emerging Asian powers, including China. African countries, led by a country like Nigeria and South Africa, Morocco, and the rest of them, I don't know why they actually tend to ignore the possibilities offered by the African continent itself. And then we fly over the Atlantic Ocean, fly over the Indian Ocean, fly over to go looking for opportunities in other continents and in other places. And then we continue to export raw materials. We continue to be hewers of wood. We belong to all sorts of organizations, bilateral arrangements, but we're always at the receiving end of the trade figures look good. Are they really to Africa's benefit to continue the colonial pattern of trade? This is the question that I think AU Agenda 2063, using its flagship project, after wanted to sort out.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting analysis. The fact, of course, is that those countries, much as I agree with you that they ought to be intra-African trade, and I mean you should trade with your neighbors much more so than people who are far away, the fact remains that those countries have much bigger investment capacity than African countries do. I mean, if you can attract them to your country, they can absolutely transform your economy. But let me ask you this, because we've been looking at this from the French perspective. What's in it for Nigeria, this Tinubu's visit to France? I mean, clearly President Tinubu is desperate for economic support to help him revive a country on the brink. But is France likely to want to really increase investment on the level that Mr. Tinubu wants and Nigeria needs, given how deep the economic and insecurity crises are in Nigeria?
In fact, that is the key question. The key question is, what is in it for Nigeria? Personally, as a person who has been involved in all sorts of trade negotiations, bilateral, multilateral arrangements, I don't see anything that is not good with bilateral investments from developed to developing countries. But the nature of investments are also important. I don't know if that is. Yes, is there portfolio investment that is coming in because the interest rates in the offered by the Central Bank of Nigeria is pretty higher than most other countries? Yes. But is that what Nigeria needs? Or does Nigeria need investments in the real sector of basic infrastructure, power, roads, rails, ports, the kind of thing China is using as soft power to penetrate into Africa and dominate it? Is France prepared to do that? Or is France prepared to go with the normal flow of EU, European arrangements with the African continent, in which it's more brazenly exploitative sometimes? Yes, French companies can operate in Nigeria to some level of mutual benefit, but for an equal partnership to take place, Nigeria must get the fundamentals of economic growth and development stabilized and sustainable. And if France could participate in that, that would be a new thing. Because honestly, I have not seen any signs, not now, that France is prepared to pivot from its colonial attitude towards African countries. What it did not do for the Francophonie African countries in over 100 years, what has happened to change that attitude? What has happened to change that policy?
Right. Well, I mean, those are very sound points. But of course, beyond the economy, is there also a strategic interest in the Sahel region that both countries share? I mean, the Sahel is in Nigeria's backyard with an insurgency still raging in northern Nigeria. There is fear here that insecurity from the Sahel could make things worse in northern Nigeria and possibly beyond, and could threaten to destabilize the entire region. And of course, the West, including France, are worried about the rise of Islamist jihadism in that region and the fact that it could also threaten the West.
In fact, to be frank, that is the bone of contention between Francophonie Africa and France. For so many years, this thing about terrorism, insurgency in Mali shifted all the way down to Niger, Burkina Faso, and it's spreading. France was there physically present, but if they were stopping this in it has an army in all of these places, or it had an army in all of these places. If it was stopping the insurgency, if the strategic value of security was priority to France, probably these three countries that now call themselves Sahel ES countries, probably that's Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, wouldn't have happened if that. So, can France bring that element of its own security forces, security assistance, if you want? I hate to use that word assistance, really, because it sounds like it is a free thing, when in reality it's never free. If France could bring some of its own security assets to assist Nigeria ward off, first of all, overcome the internal instability taking, then the sub-regional insecurity that has with these countries. Then that is a dimension that is of extreme importance to Nigeria. I hope the president is emphasizing this collaboration to stop instability and insecurity in Nigeria. One more thing, and I think this is important. France has always been, we have to admit it, France has always been a stumbling block, actually, to cooperation and collaboration, particularly of the economic nature in West Africa. Take a look at the ECO. This thing had been going on, the talk, conversations, discussion, negotiations on the ECO had been going on for almost 3 decades. And this last time when it failed, it was assumed that it was due to French interference and connivance with Côte d'Ivoire, and the ECO failed. Now, if France is changing its attitude towards Africa, if we are going to look beyond the optics of reception at the Elysee Palace, the Nigerian music being played and all of that, is now France ready to play game and allow West African, French-speaking West African countries come together in close alliance for a common West African currency, which will be of great interest to Nigeria because of ECOWAS and so on.
Right.
Yes.
Well, that is a very, very interesting conversation and a very, very sound analysis, and we thank you for that. Ambassador Humphrey Orjiakor is Nigeria's former permanent representative at the UN in Geneva, and he was talking to me on the line from here in Abuja. Thank you very much indeed.